I never thought I'd be the guy telling this story. My name is Ryan, I'm 37, and my wife, Jessica, is 35. We've been married for 8 years, and until recently, I thought we had a strong, unshakable bond. We live in a cozy suburban neighborhood where everyone knows each other just enough to smile and wave. Jessica works as a marketing manager, while I run a small but successful landscaping business. Our neighbor, Ashley, moved in about 2 years ago. She's 30, single, and undeniably gorgeous, a fitness trainer with a personality to match. But this isn't just about her. This is about betrayal. It all started a few months ago. Jessica had been acting strange, distant, distracted, and glued to her phone more than usual. At first, I brushed it off as stress from work. She'd just gotten a promotion and was working under a new boss named Ethan. He was charming, polished, and frankly, way too good-looking for me not to notice. Jessica talked about him incessantly at first, how supportive he was, how much he appreciated her ideas, and how he made her feel valued. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but things started to add up. She began staying late at work more often than ever, coming home glowing from her team dinners and brushing off my questions with vague excuses. Her wardrobe shifted too. Sleeker dresses, more makeup, even lingerie she never wore for me. I didn't want to be that husband, accusing her of something without proof, but the nagging suspicion ate away at me. One night, my gut told me to look into it. She was in the shower, and her phone was sitting on the kitchen counter. I hesitated, then picked it up, entering her passcode, a date I thought was significant to us. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. There it was, a string of messages between her and Ethan. I tightened as I read his words, "Can't stop thinking about you last night," and "You make work worth showing up for." Her replies weren't any better. The room spun. I couldn't believe it. Jessica, my wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, was having an affair. My first instinct was to confront her right then and there, but something stopped me. I needed to know how deep this went, and whether it was just texting or something more. I decided to gather evidence and stay calm, as hard as it was. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to everything. She wasn't hiding it well anymore. Late nights at work were always conveniently on nights Ethan was free. She'd be secretive with her phone, taking calls in the other room. And the final straw? I followed her one night when she said she was meeting coworkers for a networking event. Instead of heading downtown, her car pulled into a quiet hotel parking lot. I parked far enough away to watch her meet Ethan at the entrance. They laughed, kissed, and walked inside together. That image burned into my brain. When she got home later that night, I didn't say a word. Instead, I started thinking about my next steps. I had no intention of letting her off the hook easily, but I also knew confronting her wasn't enough for me. I wanted her to feel the betrayal. She had this magnetic confidence that made her the kind of person you couldn't help but notice. Over time, we'd become close, exchanging texts about gym routines and TV shows. Nothing inappropriate, at least, not until now. One day, Ashley invited me over to help fix a busted sprinkler head in her backyard. As we worked side by side, she mentioned noticing how distant Jessica had seemed lately. "Everything okay with you too?" she asked, handing me a wrench. I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Well, mostly. She's been distracted with work. It's been tough." Ashley nodded, her brow furrowing in genuine concern. "I'm sorry to hear that. You're a good guy, Ryan. If she's not seeing that, she's missing out." Her words stuck with me. That afternoon, I started looking at Ashley differently. She wasn't just my neighbor. She was a woman who understood my frustrations without judgment. And whether it was her kindness or my anger toward Jessica, I couldn't help but feel drawn to her. That's when the seed was planted. I didn't want to act on it, not yet. But the idea of revenge lingered in the back of my mind, growing stronger every time Jessica lied to me about where she'd been or who she was with. By the time Christmas rolled around, Jessica's affair was in full swing. She'd barely made time for me, claiming she was too busy preparing for the company's year-end presentations. Meanwhile, I found myself spending more time at Ashley's house, first for casual conversations, then for shared meals. She knew something was wrong but didn't push. Her presence became a comfort, a distraction from the mess my marriage had become. But deep down, I knew where this was heading. I wasn't sure when or how, but if Jessica thought she could get away with shattering my trust, she had another thing coming. Little did she know, she wasn't the only one who could play with fire. The holidays came and went, but the coldness in my house didn't thaw. Jessica was an expert at pretending. She kissed me on the cheek before heading off to work events and played the role of a caring wife during dinners with our friends. But when we were alone, it was like living with a stranger. I tried once, just once, to ask her outright if something was going on. It was late one night after she'd come home smelling of cologne that wasn't mine. "Jess," I started as she hung up her coat, "is there something you're not telling me? You've been so distant." She gave me a tight-lipped smile, not even bothering to look my way. "Work's just been crazy, Ryan. You know that." "I mean with Ethan," I pressed. Her eyes narrowed, and her tone turned sharp. "He's my boss, Ryan. Stop acting paranoid. This isn't about you." The conversation ended with her slamming the bedroom door. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore because she thought I'd never act on my suspicions. But I was done being a passive bystander in my own marriage. Ashley had become my safe harbor in the storm. Over the weeks, our conversations grew longer, our laughs more frequent. She noticed the small things about me that Jessica had long stopped caring about. How I took my coffee, my tendency to rant about bad TV endings, even the way I absent-mindedly tapped my pen when I was stressed. One Friday evening, she invited me over for dinner. Jessica had told me she'd be working late again, and frankly, I didn't care to spend another night alone. I brought over a bottle of wine, and Ashley cooked. It felt easy, normal in a way my life hadn't felt in months. As we sat on her couch, wine glasses in hand, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Ryan, why do you keep letting her do this to you?" I froze. "I see the way you look when you talk about her," she continued. "It's like you're holding on to something that isn't there anymore. And honestly, you deserve better." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Jessica and I were over. We just hadn't said it out loud yet. "I guess. I keep hoping she'll wake up and realize what she's throwing away," I admitted. Ashley tilted her head, her gaze softening. "And if she doesn't?" I didn't have an answer for that. The air between us shifted. For the first time, I noticed how close we were sitting. Her knee brushed against mine, and I didn't move away. There was an unspoken tension, a charge that hummed between us. But nothing happened that night. When I left, we hugged, and she whispered, "You're stronger than you think, Ryan." Those words stayed with me. A week later, everything came crashing down. Jessica was out late again, claiming she was at another team dinner. I decided to check in on Ashley, who had mentioned earlier that she wasn't feeling well. When I knocked on her door, she answered in sweats, her hair tied up, looking less like the polished fitness trainer and more like a real person. "Ryan," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here? You mentioned you weren't feeling great." "Thought I'd check on you," I said, holding up a bag of groceries. "Chicken soup ingredients." Her face softened, and she stepped aside to let me in. We spent the evening on her couch, watching a cheesy rom-com and laughing at how ridiculous the plot was. Somewhere between the jokes and the comfort of being with someone who genuinely cared, I felt it again, that pull toward her. This time, she felt it too. As the credits rolled, I glanced over to see her looking at me, her lips slightly parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Ashley," I started, but she cut me off. "Don't say anything." Before I knew it, she leaned in and kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, as though testing the waters. Then it deepened, igniting something in me I hadn't felt in years. But just as quickly as it started, I pulled away, guilt crashing over me like a wave. "I can't," I said, standing up abruptly. Ashley looked hurt but nodded. "I get it. You're not ready." "I'm sorry," I muttered before leaving her house and heading back to mine. When I got home, Jessica was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. I stood in the doorway, watching her, and all I could think was how hollow everything felt. The kiss with Ashley had awakened something in me, something I couldn't ignore. But I also knew that if I crossed that line, there was no going back. The following days were a blur. Jessica and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was nothing more than polite pleasantries, strained and brittle. I couldn't stop thinking about Ashley. The kiss lingered in my mind, not just for what it was but for what it represented. A glimpse of what I could have if I finally let go of this crumbling marriage. Jessica, meanwhile, carried on as if nothing was wrong. She went to work, took late-night calls, and spent weekends catching up on reports. But I knew better. I'd stopped caring about her excuses. My focus was elsewhere, on what I'd do next. It wasn't long before the opportunity presented itself. One evening, Jessica came home unusually cheerful, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Ethan's invited me to a team retreat this weekend," she announced. "A retreat?" I asked, feigning interest. "Yeah, at a lake house. It's all about team bonding and strategy planning," she said, barely glancing at me. "I'll be gone Friday through Sunday." "Sounds great," I replied, my tone perfectly neutral. She smiled, clearly mistaking my indifference for trust. When Friday rolled around, I watched her pack her overnight bag, her excitement barely contained. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving, a kiss so casual it felt more like an obligation. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my phone and texted Ashley. "Me? You free tonight?" "Ashley, depends. What's the plan?" "Me, you. Me, dinner. Your place." Her reply came instantly. "Ashley, I'll chill the wine." I arrived at Ashley's house just as the sun was setting, a nervous energy buzzing through me. She opened the door wearing a simple dress that hugged her curves, her smile warm and inviting. "You look great," I said, stepping inside. "You're not so bad yourself," something that told me tonight would be different. Dinner was perfect. We laughed, talked, and let the tension build until it was almost unbearable. By the time we moved to the couch, there was no denying where this was headed. Ashley placed her hand on mine, her eyes searching my face. "Are you sure about this?" I didn't answer with words. Instead, I kissed her, pouring months of frustration, pain, and desire into it. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming something Jessica had stolen from me. My confidence, my worth, my sense of being desired. One thing led to another, and soon we were tangled together in a way that felt both thrilling and right. For the first time in years, I felt alive, seen, and wanted. When it was over, Ashley rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns across my skin. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. Like I finally got my power back. The weekend passed in a haze of stolen moments with Ashley and long overdue clarity about my marriage. When Jessica returned Sunday evening, I was waiting for her in the living room. "Hey," she said breezily, setting her bag down. "How was your weekend?" "Enlightening," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. She froze, sensing something was off. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood, my voice calm but firm. "I know about Ethan. I know about the lies, the late nights, the hotel." Her face paled, but she quickly recovered, her voice defensive. "Ryan, I can explain." "Don't bother," I interrupted. "I've spent months watching you disrespect me, our marriage, everything we built together. But you know what? I'm done being the fool." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I stepped closer, my voice steady. "I'm talking about Ashley. While you were off with Ethan this weekend, I was with her." The look on her face was priceless. Shock, disbelief, and then a flicker of hurt. For the first time in a long time, I saw her vulnerable. "You slept with Ashley," she stammered. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "Because unlike you, I'm not going to sneak around and lie about it. This is me taking back what you stole, where I knew I'd be welcomed with open arms." As I drove, a sense of freedom washed over me. This wasn't just revenge. It was the start of something new. Jessica had broken me, but Ashley had reminded me of my worth. And for the first time in months, I felt whole again.